Baby, sit down and let Auntie May tell you this story, because it's got more lessons than a Sunday church sermon and more drama than Thanksgiving dinner when somebody brings up politics. You ever love somebody so hard that you forget to love yourself just as much? Oh honey, that's where this whole mess started. See, this wasn't just a story about a husband acting like he was raised by wolves. No ma'am. This was a story about arrogance, entitlement, and a grown man who thought he could give away what wasn't his, and about a father who stepped in with the kind of revenge you don't forget even if you live 100 years. Now buckle up, sugar. Because Auntie May is about to walk you through 6 key moments that turned one woman's frustration into a lesson that shook a whole household. When love settles into a home, it often begins gentle and soft like warm morning sunlight on a kitchen counter. You think the person you chose will treat your heart the same way you treat theirs. You think they will value your sacrifices and see your loyalty as a blessing. For a long time that was exactly what I believed. I believed in this man with the kind of blind devotion that makes a woman overlook little signs that trouble is growing. At first everything seemed harmless. He would forget small things and I would laugh it off because I told myself that love means patience. He would speak sharply once in a while and I would excuse it with the idea that everyone has bad days. Slowly though something shifted inside him. His confidence twisted into something unhealthy. It rose and swelled and puffed him up until he was walking around like he owned the very air inside our house. He had this way of carrying himself that made it look like the world was his stage. At first it was cute. Then it became concerning. Then it became insulting. He began acting as if my hard work meant nothing. Like I was just an accessory to his life rather than the partner who held the entire foundation together. I would wake up early to manage my responsibilities and he would stroll through the door with that lazy swagger acting like he was the king of Sheba. He behaved as if everything in the house existed solely for his convenience. It was as though he forgot that I paid bills. I handled groceries. I made schedules. I organized appointments. I managed the car. I held the house up while he strutted around like a peacock with tail feathers made of pure ego. There were moments when he would talk to me in a tone that made me question if he had forgotten who I was. I would give him advice and he would dismiss it like he was some wise sage who had mastered every chapter of life. His arrogance was growing like a weed that had found fertile soil. Every time I tried to communicate he would wave me off with a slight gesture that felt like a slap to the soul. Each gesture told me that he believed I would always forgive him no matter how he behaved because he assumed my love was endless. He thought he could lean on my softness without offering any strength in return. I kept overlooking it though because when you care about someone you often tell yourself that everything is just a phase. You convince yourself that people grow and change and you must ride out the storms. You hope that love will pull him back to himself. But baby, let me say this plain. Hope does not fix arrogance. Patience does not cure entitlement. Love does not erase a grown man's belief that he can do what he wants without consequence. One evening everything truly boiled inside me. He walked in from work full of energy like he had just returned from some triumphant journey. He took off his jacket in that grand way he had developed and tossed it over a chair without a second thought. I watched him move around the house, touching things and leaving them out of place without any intention of picking them up later. Then he walked right up to me and said something that would have sounded small to any outsider but felt like a lightning strike to my spirit. He said, "You should be grateful you have a man who knows what he is doing." The arrogance rolled off him like steam rising from a pot. I remember standing there thinking, who does he think he is? Why does he believe he is above accountability? Why does he act like I need his validation to breathe? But instead of arguing, I did what many women do. I swallowed my frustration and told myself that maybe he had a hard day. That maybe he did not mean it. That maybe this was just another one of those moments where patience was needed. But let me tell you this. Patience without boundaries becomes permission. Every time I stayed silent his ego grew another inch. Every time I forgave without conversation he became bolder. And soon he believed that everything under that roof belonged to him by default. Whether he earned it or not. Whether he paid for it or not. Whether I built it with my own hands or not. The day he crossed the final line started like any regular morning. I was getting ready to leave for an appointment. I reached for my car keys and they were not there. I looked in my purse. Not there. I checked the counter. Not there. I walked through the rooms feeling a growing heat in my chest because I knew something was off. Finally I found him sitting on the couch with this careless look on his face. I asked where are my keys. He looked up slow like I had interrupted some royal meditation session. Then he said, oh, I gave the car to my mother. She needed it. My whole body went still. Completely still. It was like silence wrapped around every corner of the room. I felt something snap inside me, not loudly but firmly, like the breaking of a thin wire that had been stretched too tight for too long. I said, what do you mean you gave it to her? He shrugged. A full shrug like this was nothing worth discussing. He said, you do not need it today. She does. That was it. No explanation. No apology. No thought for how disrespectful this was. He had taken something that did not belong to him. Something I worked for. Something I maintained. Something I depended on. And handed it over like it was a spare pencil in a classroom. In that moment it became clear. His arrogance had eaten away his sense of responsibility. He genuinely thought he had the right to make decisions about my possessions. He believed he was entitled to control what I owned. My feelings were irrelevant in his mind. My labor was invisible. My ownership did not matter. His mother wanted something and he wanted to look like a good son, so he chose the easiest path. He took from me without hesitation because he assumed I would not fight back. He had the audacity to sit there relaxed with one hand over the back of the couch as though he was waiting for praise. As though he had done something noble. As though I would clap for him and say, good job, you made a selfless decision. Instead I felt a mixture of anger and sadness swirl together inside me. Anger because he crossed a boundary so deep it shook my bones. Sadness because I finally understood how little he respected me. I realized that his arrogance was not a phase. It was a mindset. It was a belief that had taken root in him. And in that moment I knew something important. Love cannot survive where respect is absent. And honey, there was no respect in that room. Now let me take you into the moment that woman showed up, because baby, the way she walked into my life that day could make a preacher close his Bible and say, Lord, take the wheel. This mother-in-law of mine had always carried herself like she was the sun, and every person around her was just a satellite meant to orbit her mood and her needs. She had a talent for acting like everything that belonged to her son automatically belonged to her too. And by her son she meant the grown man who had married me and promised partnership, yet somehow still felt like a little boy carrying his mama's shadow behind him. The morning she arrived I heard her horn before I saw her face. That sharp little beep that sounded like it came from someone who believed she had every right to block traffic and demand attention. I walked outside because something in my spirit already felt wrong. I saw her standing next to my car with her hand on the door like she had been praying for this vehicle and the Lord finally answered. She wore this victorious little smile like she had climbed Mount Everest. She said, he told me you will not be needing it today, so I might as well take it. I looked at her. She looked at me. And Lord help me, the amount of restraint it took not to let my entire soul fly out of my mouth with the words I wanted to say could have earned me a medal. She did not ask if she could use it. She did not ask if I had plans. She did not ask anything. She stood there with full confidence as though the car had been waiting for her since the day it rolled off the lot. And the way she opened the door said more than her actual words ever could. It said, I deserve this. It said, I am above questioning. It said, your work, your effort, your purchase means nothing next to what I want. The strange part was she did not even look guilty. Not a drop of shame. Not an ounce of hesitation. She looked at that car like she had manifested it with a vision board and a candle. When she slid into the driver's seat it was so smooth, so natural, so rehearsed that you would think she had been practicing for this role her whole life. She did not adjust the mirrors. She did not adjust the seat. She moved like she had done all of it before. My suspicion grew right then. Had she been eyeing this car all along? There was a moment where she placed her hands on the wheel and closed her eyes like she was savoring the experience. Like this vehicle represented a triumph for her. A victory. A prize. I stood there watching her and it became painfully clear that entitlement had traveled from mother to son like a family heirloom. She had raised him to believe he was the center of every universe. And now she was living in that same fantasy world. In her mind, if her son said something belonged to her, that was enough. That was the law. That was the whole Constitution. She finally opened her eyes and looked at me with this expression that said, "Why are you still standing there?" She said with a tone dripping in superiority, "He told me you would understand." Oh, the nerve. The absolute nerve. Understand what? Understand that my personal property had been snatched away so she could go parade around town. Understand that my time and my needs did not matter. Understand that I was supposed to bend my life around her convenience. I could feel a tightness building in my chest. Not just anger. It was insult. Deep, pure insult. It was the feeling of being dismissed by someone who genuinely believed she was above you. She kept adjusting herself in the seat as if preparing for a grand journey. I noticed the way she smirked when she touched the steering wheel again. It was not gratitude. It was pride. It was satisfaction. She was reveling in the idea that she had gotten what she wanted without lifting a finger. It was the kind of pride that grows only in people who never learn accountability. She looked at me again and said, "You do not mind, do you?" The words were polite, but the tone was dripping with authority. She was not asking. She was announcing. She wanted me to nod and smile so she could feel validated in her act of taking something that was never hers. She wanted me to confirm her belief that everything connected to her son automatically belonged to her, whether it was a meal, a house, or in this case a car that I bought with my own labor. I could feel my jaw tighten. I could feel heat creeping up my throat. But I also felt something else. Clarity. Absolute clarity. This woman was not confused. She was not mistaken. She was not unaware. She knew exactly what she was doing. She recognized that car. She had seen me drive it. She knew I bought it. She knew it belonged to me. And that was precisely why she wanted it. Because she liked things that she did not earn. Things she did not pay for. Things that belonged to others. And she liked taking them because it gave her a sense of superiority. That realization made my stomach sink. This was not a misunderstanding between family members. This was disrespect rooted in arrogance. This was a woman who believed she could do anything without consequence. And she believed that because her son always let her. He learned from her how to disrespect boundaries. He learned from her how to feel entitled. He learned from her how to take without asking. When she finally started the car, the engine hummed like it was mocking me. She gave me that one last superior look. Then she backed out of the driveway as though the entire world was pausing to witness her. She drove away slow at first so I could take in the full view of what she had done. Then she sped off like she was entering a parade. The second she was out of sight, a strange silence settled over the driveway. The kind of silence that comes after a storm but before the real damage is visible. I stood there staring at the empty space where my car had been. A space that she believed she had the right to fill with her own wants. It hit me that both of them had treated me like an optional thought. A footnote. An afterword. That car represented more than transportation. It represented independence. It represented my effort. It represented everything I poured into my life. And she had grabbed it like it was a free item at a yard sale. What hurt most was not the car but the ease with which she ignored me. The ease with which she dismissed my presence. The ease with which she took ownership of something I paid for as if she had any right to it. She did not hesitate. She did not second guess herself. She did not show the slightest flicker of guilt. And that was the moment I realized something important. She was not bold because she was strong. She was bold because her son shielded her from consequences. He fed her belief that she could do no wrong. He fueled her confidence by removing every barrier she should have faced. And now that same untouchable feeling had pushed her right into my driveway where she committed one of the most disrespectful acts I had ever experienced. Later that day when she returned, she stepped out of the car humming like she had spent the afternoon shopping for joy itself. She did not thank me. She did not speak to me. She did not acknowledge the wrong she had done. She simply handed the keys to my husband as if handing a relic back to a priest. She expected him to put that car back into her hands again whenever she wanted. It was not a car to her. It was a symbol of her dominance over every part of her son's life. Including me. That car represented how she saw herself in this household. Above me, above boundaries, above reason, and the way she held those keys showed that she believed that hierarchy was permanent. That moment is when I knew this woman had no intention of respecting me. And my husband had no intention of correcting her. When he walked in later that evening, he had this smug little glow on his face, like he had just solved world hunger or rescued a kitten from a burning roof. He moved with the kind of careless confidence that only grows in people who have never been forced to see themselves clearly. He tossed his shoes off near the door and dropped onto the couch as if the day had been long and he needed rest, while I was standing there holding all my anger and confusion like a stack of heavy boxes with no place to set them down. I watched him for a moment, because sometimes silence tells you more about a person than conversation ever could. And in that silence I saw no guilt, no worry, no hint of regret. He was comfortable, he was content, he was absolutely certain that whatever he had done was perfectly acceptable. I asked him, "Where is my car?" My voice was steady, but inside me something trembled like a thin rope stretched too tight. He did not even look up right away. He just said, "Oh, Mama needed it." He said it like he was reporting that the weather outside was pleasant. Then he added, "You will be fine without it for the day." That was when something changed inside of me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a shift, a quiet but powerful click, like a lock finally opening after years of pressure. I stared at him and he finally glanced my way, and his eyes carried a dull look, like he was bored with the topic before the conversation even started. It was not just disrespect. It was dismissal, the kind of dismissal that makes you feel invisible, like your voice is nothing but background noise. He sighed and leaned back like I was the unreasonable one, like my frustration was strange to him. He waved his hand lightly and said, "Do not make it a big issue. She needed the car, you do not." I felt my whole spirit freeze. A coldness swept through me. Not anger at first, just disbelief. Pure clean disbelief that this man could look at me and say something so heartless. Something so careless. Something so ignorant of everything I contribute to this home. He took my independence and treated it like a spare item he could pass around without consequence. He took something I built with my sweat and my hours and handed it to his mother like a souvenir from a cheap gift shop. I stood there watching him, watching his relaxed body, watching his half-interested expression. And that was when it hit me like a quiet blow. He did not just fail to respect me today. He had been failing to respect me for a long time. I just had not allowed myself to see it. All those moments earlier where he dismissed my feelings came rushing back like a wave. All those times he ignored my advice. All those moments where he acted like his needs were more important than mine. Those were not isolated habits. They were pieces of a larger truth. He genuinely did not value what I brought to his life. Or maybe he did, but he felt entitled to it. He believed he was owed my labor, my patience, my sacrifices. A sense of heaviness settled inside me. A kind of sadness that is deeper than anger. Sadness that comes from realizing that someone you love has taken advantage of your heart. That someone you trusted has settled into a life where your needs are optional. That someone you believed would protect your dignity has allowed others to destroy it. I asked him, "Why would you give something that does not belong to you?" He looked confused, as though I was the one being irrational. He said, "It is all the same, we share everything." But the way he said it told me everything I needed to know. He did not mean sharing as equals. He meant sharing as long as he remained the one who decided what belonged to whom. Sharing meant he took and I accepted. Sharing meant he controlled and I adjusted. Sharing meant he could offer things I owned to anyone he pleased while expecting me to stay quiet and appreciative. He looked annoyed that I was still talking. He tried to change the subject like this was nothing more than a small disagreement. He stretched his arms and picked up his phone and scrolled through it with no concern at all for the weight of what he had done. That moment was the heaviest moment of all. Seeing him behave as if everything was normal. Seeing him act like my anger was trivial. Seeing him shrug off something that hit me so deeply. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic, not fear, strength. A strange sharp strength that can only rise when a person has reached the end of their patience. I realized that continuing the conversation would not change him. It would not open his eyes. It would not make him understand the gravity of what he had done. His mind was locked in its own comfort. So I became quiet, deep quiet, not the kind that hides a storm but the kind that prepares one. He thought my silence meant I was calming down. He thought my stillness meant I was adjusting. He thought my lack of further questions meant I would forgive him again. He thought that because I always had. He had become so used to my softness that he believed it was permanent. He believed it was endless. He believed he could keep throwing his weight around and I would always be there ready to pick up the pieces. But here is the truth that he did not see. When a woman stops yelling, that is when she is done fighting for the relationship. When a woman stops explaining, that is when she realizes the other person does not listen. When a woman stops reacting, that is when she has accepted that something bigger needs to happen. Something that will shake the foundation. I stood there long enough to let the silence become uncomfortable. Long enough to watch him shift his position slightly, wondering why I was so still. Long enough for him to realize something was different, but not long enough for him to understand exactly what was coming. He asked, "Are you okay?" But it was not concern. It was inconvenience. It was irritation. And that was the final confirmation I needed. I walked away slowly, calmly. I did not slam a door. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw accusations. I simply walked into the bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. My mind became strangely clear. All the noise of emotion faded into something sharp and steady. I knew what I had to do next. Not for revenge, not for drama, but for myself, for my dignity, for my peace. I picked up my phone. I did not call him. I did not text him. I called the one person whose voice always brought clarity. The one person who never allowed disrespect to flourish in his presence. The one person who knew how to protect without shouting and how to discipline without laying a hand. I called my father. When he answered, I did not cry. I did not rant. I simply explained what happened. My voice was flat but steady. And when I finished speaking, there was a long moment of silence on his end. A deep, deliberate silence. Then he said, "All right, I am coming." No questions, no hesitation, no disbelief. He heard the pain beneath my calm tone and he understood what it meant. My husband was in the living room watching television when I stepped out of the bedroom. He did not ask who I called. He did not care enough to wonder. He believed the situation was settled because he had decided it was not important. He had no idea that the quiet footsteps of justice were already approaching the house. When my father pulled up that evening, the air outside thickened like the world itself sensed a shift was about to take place. My father was not a tall man, but he carried himself with the kind of energy that filled a room long before he stepped into it. He had lived through enough storms to recognize one when he saw the clouds gathering. The moment I heard his footsteps on the porch, something inside me loosened like a knot finally starting to unravel. He knocked once and then opened the door without waiting for an invitation, because this was his daughter's home and he never needed permission to enter a space where his protection was called for. He walked inside slowly, not rushed, not frantic, just steady like a man who knew his purpose. My husband glanced up from the couch and for a brief second something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not shame, something closer to nervous confusion. He stood up with a half-hearted smile and said, "Hey, what brings you here?" My father did not return the smile. He did not offer a polite greeting. He simply nodded, a single controlled nod that said, "I am not here for small talk. I am here for truth." He looked at me first. Not at my husband, not at the furniture, not at the television still playing some loud show. He looked straight at his daughter with the kind of steady gaze that made me feel both held and seen. He asked one question, "Are you all right?" I said, "I am okay." But the weight behind that okay told him everything he needed to know. His posture changed slightly, just a small shift in his stance. Almost invisible, but I knew my father well. That shift meant a line had been crossed. A serious one. Then he turned toward my husband. Not aggressively, not angrily, just directly. My father never wasted words on disrespect. He let silence do the heavy lifting. He asked, "Where is the car?" The tone was calm but sharp enough to cut through stone. My husband tried to laugh it off by saying, "Oh, that. Mama needed it. She will bring it back later." He said it playfully, like he expected my father to shrug and say, "All right, no problem." But instead my father simply stared at him with eyes that held years of hard work and lessons and firm discipline. My father asked, "You gave away her property without asking her." My husband opened his mouth then closed it again as if he was searching for a better explanation. Finally he said, "It is all one household. She did not need it today. It is fine." The moment those words left his mouth, I saw my father's entire expression change. Not dramatically, not violently, but with a kind of icy disappointment that could freeze fire. My father had always believed in one rule above all others. Respect must live in a home the same way air lives in the lungs. Without it nothing can survive. And here was this man, my husband, acting like respect was optional. Acting like my father raised a daughter whose possessions could be taken without her voice mattering. Acting like her autonomy was a suggestion rather than a right. My father asked, "Do you think marriage means ownership of another person?" My husband grew defensive. He said, "That is not what I meant." His voice got louder, not because he was strong but because he felt cornered by his own ignorance. My father did not raise his voice. He did not repeat himself. He simply stepped forward very slightly. Not in a threatening way. In a steady, authoritative way that made every word feel heavier. He said, "A man who respects his wife does not make decisions about her belongings without asking her. A man who honors his commitment does not dismiss her voice. A man who values partnership does not hand over what is hers to someone else as if she is a child with no ownership of her own life." My husband looked stunned. He was not used to being spoken to like that, especially by someone who did not shake or scream or become emotional. My father spoke with a strength that came from quiet certainty, the kind of certainty that turns truth into stone. Then my father did something that surprised even me. He walked past my husband and began looking around the house. Not searching for anything, just observing. He inspected the walls, the furniture, the layout of the rooms. He walked through the living room into the kitchen, then into the hallway. I followed him because I knew what he was doing. My father had always believed that a home tells the truth about a marriage. A home reveals who carries the weight and who benefits from it. He walked back into the living room and stood in front of both of us. He said, "I see how she works to keep this home alive. I see how she organizes everything. I see how she supports you. Yet you treat her as though she is invisible." My husband tried to reply, but my father held up a hand. A small gesture, but it silenced him instantly. My father said, "You have forgotten the basic rule of leadership. You cannot lead a household that you do not respect. You cannot claim authority that you have not earned. You cannot claim partnership while behaving like a dictator." The room grew so quiet that even the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen felt loud. My father's words filled every corner of the space like thunder without sound. Then he asked only one thing. "Why did you think it was all right to take her property?" My husband stood there unable to explain himself. He muttered something about helping his mother. Something about thinking it was not a big deal. Something about assuming I would understand. Each excuse sounded weaker than the last. My father listened. His face remained calm but his eyes darkened with disappointment. He said, "You do not take from your wife to give to your mother. A grown man sets boundaries. A grown man protects his household. A grown man does not sacrifice one woman for the comfort of another." My husband tried to say, "You are overreacting." My father took one slow breath. Not a sigh, a breath that signaled deep control. He said, "Son, this is not overreaction. This is recognition. Recognition that you have failed to consider her voice, her independence, her dignity. Recognition that you have allowed your mother to overstep her place in this marriage. Recognition that you are not thinking like a partner. You are thinking like a child seeking approval." The truth hit my husband like a wall. He sat down heavily because the weight of my father's words pressed down on him. My father then turned to me. His face softened instantly. He said, "You are my daughter. And I will not let anyone disrespect what you have built." His voice was low but firm. Then he faced my husband again and said, "We will handle this properly. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with action." And in that moment I saw something I had not seen in a long time. I saw a man who truly understood the meaning of protection. Not possessive protection, not controlling protection, but protective love. Love that does not tolerate disrespect. Love that does not look away when boundaries are crossed. He walked to the door. He said, "I will take care of this." I knew he meant more than handling a car issue. He meant restoring respect, restoring balance, restoring dignity. And when my father stepped back onto that porch into the fading light of evening, he carried with him the quiet promise that justice would be delivered not with rage but with precision. The moment my father stepped into the house, the air shifted as if the walls themselves were preparing for a storm they knew had been building for far too long. My husband tried to stand tall, but the truth was clear. He looked like a man who had been caught stealing sugar from a jar and now feared the spoon would come down hard on his knuckles. My father took one slow look at him, then one long look at his mother, and then at me, as if he were painting a full picture in his mind before speaking. He did not raise his voice. He did not pace. He did not shout. He spoke with that calm force that only a man who knows he holds all the power can carry. And that calm shook the entire room. He told my husband that marriage is not a playground and a wife is not a toy to toss around in moments of arrogance. He said a woman brings honor into a home when she gives her partnership her time, her kindness, her heart. And any man who cannot protect what she brings does not deserve to hold the position of husband. His words floated through the tense silence like arrows that did not need speed to pierce. My husband swallowed hard and his mother shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared interrupt. Then my father reached into a folder he had brought with him. I had no idea what was inside, but I knew from the way he held it that it carried a weight heavier than paper. He laid it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were documents, receipts, legal filings, photographs, and signatures. My husband blinked in confusion because he did not understand the language of paperwork the way my father did. But he soon learned. My father explained that the car my husband had given to his mother was legally under my name because my father had purchased it fully and intentionally as a gift of independence for his daughter. He said he had tracked the transfer my husband arranged behind my back and discovered that the signature used did not match mine. Which meant one thing: someone had forged authorization. Someone had committed a crime. Someone had used deception to take property that was not theirs. My husband looked like the floor had opened under him. My mother-in-law gasped and began to insist she did not know. She said she had simply accepted the car as a gift because her son told her he had the right to give it. But my father stopped her with a single raised hand. He said ignorance is not a shield when wrong is done. He said a grown woman knows better than to take something that does not belong to her, especially when it comes from a marriage she is not part of. Her face reddened and she sank back into her chair as if the very wood were trying to push her out. My father continued with such control that every word felt final. He stated that the car must be returned immediately. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not after excuses. He said the keys must come back into my hands the same way they were taken. And if anyone chose to defy this, he would proceed with legal action. He said he had already contacted an attorney who was fully briefed. He said charges could be filed. He said this was not a threat. It was a path that would be taken if they forced his hand. My husband glanced at his mother, who looked as though she had lost all ability to speak. But my father did not stop there. He leaned forward slightly and addressed my husband in a tone that was not angry yet held more fire than rage ever could. He told him that marriage requires maturity and that power games have no place in a home meant to hold peace. He said when a man decides to undermine his wife, he is not showing strength, he is showing weakness. He said choosing his mother over his wife was not loyalty, it was imbalance and harm and disrespect. My husband finally opened his mouth, but only a thin shaky sound came out that did not form words. My father said I deserved better. He said every daughter deserves better. Not because she is perfect, but because she gives her life to build a home with a man she trusts. And that trust should never be used against her for the comfort of another woman. His voice remained steady. His expression did not change. He did not need anger because truth was enough. Truth was powerful. Truth made the room feel small. Then he told my husband something that made the air freeze. He said he had spoken to me privately and he knew how deeply I had been hurt. He said he believed in forgiveness, but not at the price of self-respect. He said if my husband ever tried to belittle me again or make decisions that harmed me, he would step in once more, but next time he would not come to talk. He would come to remove me from that house entirely. The message was clear. This was a warning delivered with love but shaped with steel. My husband lowered his head and my mother-in-law looked away because there was no defense left to offer. The truth had been laid bare. The consequences were lined up like stones ready to fall. My father gathered his papers, placed them back in the folder and stood. But before he left he turned to me, placed his hand gently on my shoulder and said I was not alone and I would never be alone. He said strength is not about shouting or fighting or proving anything. Strength is choosing yourself when others try to dim your light. When he walked out, the room did not feel the same. It felt lighter yet heavier. It felt cleansed of lies yet filled with the echo of truth. My husband looked broken, but not in a cruel way. More like a man who had seen the mirror held up to him and realized the reflection staring back was not who he wanted to be. His mother remained silent. Her pride had melted into something softer. Maybe guilt. Maybe realization. Maybe both. And I stood there breathing slowly, letting the moment settle, letting my heart catch up with everything that had poured out. My father had done what I could not do. He had spoken without trembling. He had defended me without hesitation. He had drawn lines I had been too afraid to draw. And in that moment I understood something powerful. Family does not just stand with you when life is good. Family stands when someone else tries to knock you down. Family does not ask if you are strong enough. Family becomes strong with you. I looked at my husband and said nothing because words were no longer needed. He saw the disappointment, the exhaustion, the hurt. And maybe for the first time he truly felt it. Maybe for the first time he understood that his actions had consequences that stretched far beyond a simple item or decision. They had pierced trust. They had wounded love. They had shaken the foundation of the home we were supposed to build. But now the truth had been spoken. The storm had passed, and the next step would be mine to choose. When the dust finally settled after my father walked out the door, I felt a stillness that was almost strange. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm when the thunder has passed but the air is still heavy with the memory of lightning. My husband stood on one side of the room and his mother on the other, and neither of them knew what to say. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt like I held the power that had been taken from me. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I finally realized the truth about myself. I was stronger than the disrespect I had endured. I was stronger than the lies. I was stronger than the betrayal. I was stronger than the silence I kept while I tried to be the good wife who swallowed pain so the home could look perfect from the outside. My husband took a hesitant step toward me, but I lifted my hand and told him to stop. Not loudly, not angrily, just firmly enough that he understood the boundary. He froze as if he had touched a flame and felt the burn too late. I told him that trust was not a decoration he could place on a shelf whenever he pleased. It was the foundation that held a marriage upright. And he had fractured it with a single reckless choice. His eyes were wet, but I did not let that sway me. Tears do not erase choices. Regret does not erase damage. Apologies do not erase disrespect when they come after the consequences are already staring someone in the face. His mother rose and tried to approach me, but I held my ground and she stopped too. I told her gently but truthfully that from the moment she accepted the car she knew something was wrong, because no mother with life experience can pretend she does not understand when a boundary is being crossed. She lowered her eyes because she knew it was true. She had been fighting for attention from her son in a way that pushed me out of the picture. She treated me like a rival instead of a partner. And that was a wound I could no longer ignore. Then I said something I never thought I would say. I told them that from this moment forward my home would have new rules. Not because I wanted control, but because I wanted respect. I said my husband would not make major decisions without me again. I said his mother would not interfere in matters that belonged to the two of us alone. I said I would not tolerate being sidelined, ignored, or treated like a burden. And I said if these conditions could not be honored, then I would not remain in a home where my worth was up for negotiation. The words came out in a flow, almost like they had been gathering inside me for years, waiting for a moment to break free. My voice did not shake. My hands did not tremble. I had finally stepped into my own strength. And something remarkable happened. My husband listened. Really listened. He did not argue or interrupt or defend his mother or blame me. He simply stood there, taking in every word like each one was a stone that weighed heavily upon his conscience. He said he understood. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He said he never meant to hurt me, but that he now realized his intentions did not matter because his actions had caused real pain. He said he wanted to fix things if I would allow him the chance. I told him that fixing things would take time and effort and change, not promises made in a moment of fear. I said trust had to be rebuilt brick by brick and he would have to earn each one. Then I turned to his mother and told her I respected the place she held in his life, but that did not give her the right to take space in mine that did not belong to her. I told her that I was his wife, not his rival, and that she needed to understand boundaries or she would lose access to the home entirely. She nodded slowly and I could see in her eyes that something had shifted. Maybe it was humility, maybe it was shock, maybe it was the realization that her actions had finally reached a limit. For once she did not protest or defend herself. She simply accepted what needed to be said. The room felt different after that, not calmer exactly but real. Honest, raw. It was like everyone had finally admitted the truth none of us wanted to face. And I felt my heart expand, not with softness but with clarity. I realized I had spent so much time trying to keep peace that I lost my own. I realized I had been shrinking myself to avoid conflict. I realized I had been bending until I nearly snapped. But now I was standing straight again. My father's intervention had opened the door for me, but I was the one who had to walk through it. And I did. I told my husband that before we continued as a couple I needed space to think. So I packed a small bag and went to stay with my parents for a few days. Not in anger but in self-preservation. My husband did not fight it. He did not chase me. He simply nodded and said he would wait for me to return when I was ready. His mother looked emotional, but I did not comfort her. This was not the time. This was the moment for everyone to sit with their own consequences. During those days at my parents' house, something inside me healed. Not quickly, not magically, but steadily. I talked with my father and he told me that strength is not about winning or losing. Strength is about knowing your value and refusing to let anyone treat you as less. I spoke with my mother and she told me that every marriage faces storms, but some storms reveal whether the foundation is weak or simply untested. I sat alone in my old bedroom, sometimes thinking, sometimes crying, sometimes resting. And each day I felt myself grow a little more like a tree pushing new roots into the soil after a harsh winter. When I finally returned home, my husband greeted me quietly. He did not cling or plead or make promises. He simply showed me a folder of his own. Inside were bank documents, forms and new registrations that placed every shared asset equally under both our names. He had already returned the car to me. He had already apologized to my father. And he had already told his mother she could not interfere in our marriage again. His actions did not erase the past, but they did show me something important. He was trying, not for show, not out of fear, but out of a genuine desire to rebuild what he had broken. In that moment I realized something. Healing would not happen in a single breath. Trust would not return overnight. But we had entered a new chapter. A chapter where my voice mattered. Where my boundaries mattered. Where my individuality mattered, and where the marriage could grow with both of us standing on equal ground. I looked at him and said we would move forward slowly but honestly. I said I would give him the chance to earn back trust, but I would not force myself to forget the lessons I learned. He understood, and in that understanding there was peace. As for his mother, she kept her distance respectfully, and slowly she began to approach me, not with entitlement but with humility. Eventually we found a balance that had never existed before. Not friendship, not rivalry, but respect. Something that had been missing all along. In the end, my father's revenge had not been loud or violent. It had been truth. It had been protection. It had been justice. And that justice gave me the strength to rebuild my life on my own terms. I walked away from the ordeal not weaker but wiser. Not defeated but empowered. And I knew from that day forward that no one would ever take advantage of my kindness again. My voice had returned. My confidence had risen. My heart had learned its worth. And I would never allow anyone to take that away from me again.